Hi, I'm Grace Victory. I'm an author, content creator, mother and survivor, and this is my story. So when the pandemic first hit, I didn't really understand it. I previously was living quite a fast-paced, turbulent life like many people my age. Living in London, everything is really go, go, go. I used to work all the time. I would choose work over family functions, over rest. I loved to work, I lived to work. And I struggled with boundaries and taking a break. So when everything stopped, I honestly celebrated. And then I fell pregnant in May 2020. So being pregnant in that time, going to appointments by myself, it was just a thing, and I kind of got on with it. I dreamed of being a mum, and I knew that I'd be a good mum. And so when there was like a little baby boy growing inside of me, I was elated. And then it all went downhill. I just didn't feel right. And I know my body, and I knew it was something that was different to like pregnancy hormones. And then I think it was the Thursday, so the day after, I had a bit of a fever. I was warm one minute, then cold the next. And I was like, definitely don't feel right. And then on the Friday, I was like, I need to book a COVID test. So we went for a drive-through COVID test at a test centre. And I remember driving away after doing it and my boyfriend saying, do you think you've got COVID? And I said, yeah. And he said, yeah, I think you've got it too. Drove to hospital and I got admitted to maternity triage. And because of COVID, my partner had to come in with me and he couldn't leave. We had our own room, and then obviously like all the tests and monitoring began. I don't remember much because I know now that's because my oxygen was desaturating and getting lower and lower. But they came back in, it was Christmas Eve, and said, we're taking your baby out. And it was actually like a really lovely C-section. And I remember them putting his head to mine. His head was like small and warm, and they put his head next to my head, and then they took him to the NICU because he was 2 months premature. I went into the ICU, I believe, like Christmas Day sometime, and my oxygen was going lower and lower and lower. And then Boxing Day, I was put into a coma, and it was to allow my body to rest and my lungs to rest, because obviously when you're fighting for oxygen, you get really tired. So yeah, I went from Christmas Eve having my baby to Christmas Day having no memory whatsoever of that day, to then Boxing Day being in a coma. They woke me up a few times, but the time that worked was mid-Feb. I can't remember how I found out, but I know it wasn't my family that told me. But they told me that I had cardiac arrest, and I said, huh? You're joking? And they were like, no, you literally died. And I was like, no, I didn't. Like, I didn't believe it. But I remember them, telling me that, you're in hospital. And I was freaking out because I believed I was in Reading. I was in a hospital in Reading, and I was screaming about it, like, I'm so far away from my boyfriend and my baby, like losing my mind. And then they were like, you're in London. And I was like, huh? So waking up, I was full of relief. I was like, oh my God, like, I'm not in Reading, I'm not dead, I'm actually here and I'm alive. But I think the hard part was seeing my notes and asking doctors like what actually happened, and them saying, well, your lungs filled with secretions that you couldn't cough up, and you had pneumonia, and then you had multiple organ failure, and then you was on dialysis, and all these things, basically all that could go wrong with my body went wrong. It's March 8th, and apparently it was International Women's Day, which I just think is amazing. That's when I tweeted saying I'm awake, because I knew that it would be public and people will be wondering where I've gone. So I wanted to let people know that I'm awake and I'm alive and I'm like okay, as okay as you can be after going through what I've gone through. When you're in the ICU, the windows are all frosted, so you don't see the sun, you don't see rain, you don't see trees. It's just nothing. So for me, when I was facing the most horrific time, I would use my phone like it was clean knickers. And I would FaceTime my boyfriend and see my baby. That's how I knew, you know, that he was smiling now, or he'd been sick, or, you know, the new mum things I was having to watch through FaceTime. And it was awful, really awful. And I don't think words will ever articulate the pain of missing your baby and knowing that he's fine. He's got his dad, he's got my mum, he's got my sister, but none of them are mum. It's like, I'm fine talking about what happened, and then like when I talk about being a mum and when I mention Cyprus, that's when I'm just an emotional wreck, because that's your baby, and as a mum you're so like animalistic with it, and like you would do anything for your child, because any mum would. And being away from him was hell on earth. And now I never want to be away from him. Like, obviously every mum needs a break, but I'm mourning so much, like his first smile, his first bath, his first cry, so much stuff that I should have been there for. And I was probably like really horrible to be around at some points in hospital, because I was completely and utterly traumatized. I remember having like my big rehab meeting in hospital to find out how I'd manage at home, and they said, oh, we're thinking of like May 22nd as a discharge, and I was like, hell no, I'm going home before May 9th because that's my sister's birthday, and I'm done, get me out of here. And then that week I made sure like I was able to walk a bit further, I could do small steps, because one thing about recovery from an ICU stay is that it's long. They say it's about 2 years, and it's not just the physical recovery, learning to sit, learning to walk, climb the stairs. Some people have to learn to talk again and to eat again, but there's also like learning to pee again, because you have had a catheter in for so long. But I knew I needed to be home. I knew that it would be difficult going home, but it would pay off. It was honestly the most confusing time for me. Like I should be so happy I'm out of hospital, but I was full of anxiety and apprehension, and I was like out in the outside world, and suddenly I could go in the garden, but I didn't know how, and I could do makeup again, but what if I can't do it? And it was crazy. But then the months went on, and May turned into June, and June was July, and then August, and then now I'm here, and I'm set to make a full recovery, and I can walk, I can get in and out of the bath. I basically live a normal life again. I feel a lot of feelings. I've obviously got PTSD, having my baby, being put into a coma, cardiac arrest, it's all coming up. I do have these feelings sometimes of like, did I do enough? Did I like protect myself enough? Maybe I shouldn't have gone out on that one particular day. And there's all these things that people don't talk about, the shame and the guilt. I'm trying to just be like kind and gentle and show myself grace, because healing isn't linear. and things take time, and I know that the only way out is through. I've just got to sit with my feelings, take time off when I need to, and just like fill up on love, the love of for myself, the love with my baby, my partner, my family, my friends. I'm surrounded by so much love. There's no other reason why I survived apart from I was meant to, and I had too much love being sent my way that I came back.